Can you start, Sriranjani?
Can we stop the screen share, please? Yeah. Good evening. We are having a small technical glitch. We had requested for 500 for Zoom participants. Somehow that didn't come in. So we will be soon starting the Facebook Live, and we will have everyone join the Facebook. So good evening. Today is 10th of September. We all have joined this meeting to observe the World Suicide Prevention Day. Suicide and depression are the most tragic nightmares facing humanity today. Every 40 seconds, a person dies by suicide globally. In India, suicide deaths have been on the rise. According to the national records, approximately 1.4 lakh people ended their lives in 2019, which is nearly 400 suicides on a daily basis. The reason for this widespread tragedy are many, heightened even more because of the global pandemic, ranging from career anxiety, workplace and financial instability, to domestic violence, academic stress, failed romance, peer pressure, paranoia, anger, acute loneliness, disease, and old age disabilities. The ultimate trigger for suicide is the acute hopelessness which an individual experiences when they have no one to talk to, no one around them to listen to, or understand their feelings of terrifying pain. Even if they do find someone willing to listen to them, they often feel judged and misunderstood. And that sometimes results in taking away their own lives. It is here that we befrienders, centers of Befrienders India, like Lifeline Kolkata, Roshni in Secunderabad, Maitri in Kochi, and other 13 centers play a significant role. We make ourselves available to these overwhelmed individuals trapped in vicious cycle of pain, helplessness, and hopelessness. Rotary Club of Calcutta have been supporting Lifeline Foundation Kolkata in their endeavors to save lives and lend a listening ear with empathy, understanding, and patience. Our Rotary International President, Rotarian Shekhar Mehta, emphasizes on supporting mental health. The biggest gift we can give is the power to touch a life, he says. The Go Yellow campaign, Lifeline started to make people aware that it's okay not to be okay. Yellow is the color of hope and sunshine. And in these unprecedented times, the Go Yellow India movement may become the ray of hope for those who've been suffering silently. I now request the volunteer. I now request the volunteer from Roshni, Secunderabad, to introduce our speaker today. Today's topic, all wounds are not visible. It's a small effort to sensitize our members about the power of active listening, to understand and to be there for a family member or a friend who is feeling emotionally drained. Can you please introduce the speaker, Ms. Malti?
Yeah. Thank you, Sriranjani. A very good evening to one and all. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others, said Mahatma Gandhi. I'm very fortunate that I belong to two such service organizations, service-oriented organizations, One is Roshni Trust Hyderabad and Rotary Club of Cantonment Secunderabad, where we often ask ourselves the most important question: what am I doing for others? Today, I'm privileged to introduce one such humanitarian who is working towards reducing the stigma around mental health. Dr. Jairanjan Ram is a senior consultant psychiatrist and has received his education from Kolkata, Bangalore, and UK.
Yeah,
He
I'm
confounded-
online. I'm here. I'm online.
He confounded Mental Health Foundation Kolkata, which focuses on providing treatment for mental health problems and provides training for capacity building for organizations working on the interface of education and social care. He sincerely believes that mental health and well-being is everyone's business and hence actively participates in community initiatives to reduce stigma around mental health. Invisible wounds are the hardest to heal. Their closure depends upon the love of others, on patience, understanding, and the tender gift of time. Today's topic will enlighten us about the same. Thank you, Shiranjani.
Thank you. Thank you, Malti. Now we would like to hear from Dr. Ram about all wounds are not visible.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Joshi. Thank you, Ms. Malti. First and foremost, it's a privilege to be amongst all of you. And I mean this with all sincerity because, right at the outset, let me tell you that I have got a deep admiration for the work which all of you are doing so sincerely. And more importantly, I'm a professional. I often say I didn't have anything better to do. I actually wanted to be a chef, a traveling chef, but I chose the career of medicine instead because I couldn't even boil an egg. And therefore, I do this as a vocation, but all of you have busy lives, other careers, professions, and yet you do such a noble thing out of your willingness to engage with those who are extremely hopeless, helpless, and feeling on the edge. So I always kind of participate whenever I think Mrs. Singh asks me to, because I really think it is a privilege. So I must express my deepest gratitude for all the work which you are doing for so many years. So thank you for that. As a part of the community, as a part of the profession, as an individual, as a human being, I have got deepest regard for what you do. Let me begin with a very small anecdote, which happened about a year back, exactly a year back, when the pandemic was raging and we were continuing to operate. So I was sitting in my office and a couple in their 60s came and saw me. And what had happened was that they had their only son was around 28, 29, and he had chronic kidney disease. And they had gone to a very reputed center in South India for kidney transplant because that's where he was receiving all his treatment. And he had been suffering from the age of 13 or 14 and had always been very courageous, brave, and managed his illness throughout, his adolescence, early adulthood. And finally, a donor was found and they went to this center. And around the time when they reached, the pandemic just happened. So which was about early March, end February. And his transplant was due sometime around middle of March. So what happened was that they said, and you all would be aware that we were just beginning to learn how to deal with this terrible, terrible disease or condition. So this transplant was put off, but they were said that continue to have dialysis, we will continue to treat you and stay here. And as soon as this kind of we come to grips with the pandemic, we will do the transplant. So this family, many families from eastern part of India go and stay there for many months in this center in South India. And they were kind of, hired a small flat, they were staying there and everything was going on as per plan. So after about a couple of months after staying there, the family realized that there is no guarantee when the transplant would happen, because we were still unsure about how to deal with liver kidney transplant during the pandemic, where this risk of infection is such high, you would be given immunosuppressants. So what happened that they were together there in that flat. It was a 5-story building. The son appeared quite chirpy, said that, "Mom, let's cook together. Let me cook your favorite dish." And they all had a nice meal, went to bed. And next morning, they were woken up by the caretaker of the building. And they realized that their son had gone up early hours of the morning and jumped from the 5th floor and left a note saying that, "I really can't endure this any longer. I had put all my hopes in getting a transplant, leading a new life, but this, darkness never seems to end." So I had this couple in front of me, weeping inconsolably, which many of you would have experienced through your work. And again, I really had no words to say, but that drove home the impact of the pandemic, the impact of feeling hopeless, the impact of, feeling that there is no light at the end of the tunnel, which each time, when we talk to someone who is feeling suicidal, we are reminded of that. But what more particularly why I wanted to bring you this story is it really drove home the point, the deep impact of the pandemic is having on our lives. I don't think any single family has been unaffected by this terrible, terrible affliction. All of us are affected. Some of us are maybe more privileged, are more blessed, and by the grace of the Almighty, we may not have had the terrible travesty which has befallen on others. But I think each of us are affected. And this was another point, just who would have thought that a transplant would be delayed because of the pandemic, and then this young 28-year-old would feel that it's no longer worth living. And since then, all of us have become more and more aware of the many ways in which it has affected us. I have been thinking about all of us, like all of you, all of us are thinking about the pandemic, the impact of it. If I'm allowed to say this word, there is possibly a blessing of the pandemic. If there is a redeeming feature, I think for those who are working in the field of mental health, for all of us who are gathered here, I think one of the blessing has been that people are more willing to talk about mental health. I think that is one of the most positive outcomes which has happened. Mrs. Singh and me, we would have long conversations about involving the media in order to, talk about the Suicide Prevention Day. And trust me, we would really have to beg, very, very dear friends who are in senior positions in media houses, and they would say, "Oh my God, Jay, this is too complicated, too difficult a topic for a newspaper, boss. Please don't create a story, create something a positive. There is nothing positive about someone wanting to kill themselves. And how do you pitch a story?" which is really a complex and really a very difficult subject. But I was again glad to see today's Times of India had a very large article. So on Lifeline, on Befrienders, on the mental health aspect of pandemic. So I think collectively a change is happening, and therefore this year's theme, which is creating hope through action, is such an apt word, because I feel, and as Ma'am Joshi said, that hopelessness, feeling hopeless, is one of the key determinants of suicide. And if through a multitude of actions, and I choose my words carefully, through a variety of actions, if we are able to ignite a slightest flicker of hope for those who are feeling helpless, feeling hopeless, feeling suicidal, and if we are just able to postpone that feeling that no, life may be terrible, but we will live to see another day, I think we almost always avert a crisis. So one of the things which I feel is very important, this is not a very, as the media houses in our experience, as the community in large, why do people do not want to engage with this topic, which is a harsh reality, which we all know, but somehow we feel that it is too complex for us to engage. So I think this year's theme is so apt, because we all know that preventing suicide, improving mental health, improving sense of well-being is everyone's business. It's not just one or two person, but together as a community, we need to do a variety of actions, which might be a very small gesture, but that can go in a long way to improve someone's mental health. Therefore, I feel that it is very important to continue to create awareness, to continue to create dialogues, and make other people aware that we each have a role in preventing suicides. How can we do that? Number one, I think we can each take time out and reach out to others whom we feel are not coping well. I think taking time out and doing this, I think, is one of the greatest services which all of you are doing. We can all do. Number one. Number two, we need to educate ourselves that a person who is contemplating suicide, a person who is in deep depression, may not be able to share because the wound is too deep. The stigma in our society is so grave that I will not make my wound, my sadness, my hopelessness visible to you, because I fear I will be labeled as a weak person. So therefore, reducing the stigma, encouraging people to come out and share their feelings, and accepting that I can be depressed, my neighbor can be depressed, my son can be depressed, my wife can be depressed, and it is not a sign of weakness. And knowing more about the signs and symptoms of depression, I think if we are able to do these three things, one is taking time out to reaching out for people who are not coping well, convincing ourselves and others that depression and feeling suicidal is not a sign of weakness, and thirdly, making ourselves more cognizant about the signs and symptoms of depression. If we are able to do these three things, I think we will have a huge impact in preventing this terrible, terrible affliction, which, falls on so many families. So I personally believe that, like all of you do, that prevention is possible, and each of us have a role. We need not have all the answers right at the beginning when I'm talking to someone who is feeling hopeless and suicidal. So therefore, as the Befrienders, policies, as the Lifeline Foundation follows, all of you follow, just empathetic listening is the skill, because many people feel that they are not heard, and just listening to them, allowing them to ventilate, is one of the biggest service we can do for humanity. So I will finish here, and then let's have some discussion and debate. And okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ram. Now I would request Ms. Shubhika Singh. She's the consultant psychologist with Lifeline Foundation, to do the question answer session.
Good evening, Dr. Ram. It was amazing hearing you speak, as always.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I hope, today, if anyone in the audience has a question, please post it in the chat and I will take it up. But just picking up from what Dr. Ram said currently, that depression is not a weakness. And as family members, if we're able to reach out and not stigmatize someone, it would be really beneficial, and that can actually change the entire family setup and the society that we're living in. So are there any tips, Dr. Ram, that you can share with people of what are some ways to reach out to someone they're concerned about, who's looking withdrawn, who's perhaps showing off some signs of depression?
I think one of the best ways is to kind of ask the person directly that how he or she has been, and are things okay? Are you kind of feeling okay? Why haven't you called me? Are you kind of, feeling a bit too tired? I think broaching, Shubhika, this issue about, so let us kind of imagine a real situation. So suppose I know you for a long period of time, and I know that this is your usual self. You reach out to people, you are vivacious, and and then I realize I see you a couple of times and I feel that you are withdrawn and you are not kind of, you are not your usual self. So I would kind of hopefully reach out to you and ask you, Shubhika, how have things been? And ask with very general questions, so as not to kind of overwhelm you. So there is this very fine balance of not being too intrusive. And have you been sleeping well? What about your energy? Why don't you come for tennis? I don't see you there. And why didn't I kind of, I wished you WhatsApp, you didn't reply. And then gently probe. And I think the issue is to be very respectful towards you and ask questions that, are you feeling okay, Shubhika? And can we go for a coffee? And do you think I can help you in any way? Is there something, can we talk? And do give me a buzz, if you feel in a couple of days, if you want to go out. And then I would leave it there. And then maybe in the evening, again, I will text you and say that, it was great reaching out to you. Do connect and let me know how things are. So it's a very gentle, respectful approach we need to have with someone else and about whom we are concerned, just to point out the fact that I am available for you, and I will be able to reach out, and you can kind of, reach out to me.
Right. And also kind of highlighting some of these little things that one does that you're missing, right? Like, oh, I haven't seen you on the tennis court, or you haven't texted back, but in a very non-stigmatizing way.
Yeah.
And if I can add, and definitely not asking the question, what is wrong with you? Which I think a lot of people tend to say, hey, what's wrong with you? Right.
I will again tell you a real story. We have got a very close knit friends group of WhatsApp, and there is someone who is always, so we tease her a lot, and then she would kind of, I will slap you, is a kind of it is her standard response. And, and for a while I noticed that for about 15-20 days, she wasn't kind of at all responding. And even when we tried to irritate her, poke fun of her, she wouldn't respond. So I actually called her and I said that, what has happened? Where are your, I'm missing your slaps. Where are the virtual slaps which you send all of us? And, she told me that I'm feeling very, very depressed because my dog has died. And, and I'm so glad you called and you noticed that I'm not my usual self. And then we had a chat, and then we made it was a very light banter and all that. So I kept checking on her separately. So I think these are the things I think we need to be aware that the person next to me can be depressed, but may not be able to express, as is today's theme, not all things are visible.
Yeah.
I think recognition and acceptance of the fact that my partner can be depressed, my child can be depressed, my colleague can be depressed, I think is the biggest lesson.
Right, absolutely. That's actually really powerful. But what about Dr. Ram, in a case where the family member may be in denial? And, I think this is something where, the pandemic is highlighting, right, that, people are concerned about their family member at home who's, become reclusive and is showing all the signs. What would be the right way of reaching out to this person who's preferring to stay locked in and getting aggressive, perhaps when they're checked in on?
I think a couple of things I have noticed is during all of, maybe you would too, that many young people or many of us would feel so despondent, and we would feel that there is no hope. And, often we feel irritable and we push people away. So often we need to understand the reason for my pushing away people, locking myself in, being obnoxious, for a want of a better word, is actually a behavior which is reflecting my inner hopelessness. So we need to go beyond the outward facade which I am portraying and try and gently probe and say that, look, I'm worried about you. I'm concerned about you. I don't mean to irritate you. So it is just because I'm worried. And if you are feeling unable to, that you can communicate to me, many parents and I have found that many of the family members do know that who is the person with whom this person relates the best. So it might be a trusted tutor, it might be a trusted teacher, it might be a friend's mother, and I would possibly encourage them to enlist the help of others and form a circle of, people who can gently reach out and say that, hey, we often do feel like this. So if you're not willing to talk to your mom and dad, can we do something? Can we go out and stuff like that? So I think it is important to involve other significant members in the person's life who can help out.
Who can perhaps reach out, right? Amazing. So we have a question here where someone is asking, what are some signs of depression, and when is it the right time for me to consult a psychiatrist to deal with it?
I think this is see, depression as it's a multifaceted beast, really, and it's every individual have different expressions of depression. I think when I would hesitate to kind of point out when do I consult a psychiatrist. I think any mental health professional. So I think that is better that way, because I don't think psychiatrists are gifts of gods who you need to consult. You can consult any trained mental health professional. Suppose I'm concerned about my friend and he is not coming to work, his job performance has dipped, he has become more irritable, reclusive, maybe smoking or drinking more, has gone off the radar completely, not returning my calls, then I would reach out and say that, hey, let's go to someone, let's go to a mental health professional. One of the other ways which family members can enlist is, all families have some trusted family physicians. They can reach out to the trusted family physician and get that person to talk with someone who may need help. And I think all of us need to trust the judgment, whether of any professional, counselor, psychologist, whether this person needs medicine or not. So I personally believe that any properly trained mental health professional can guide properly.
Okay. And there's someone else who's asked, is it possible that someone might have suicidal ideation, even if he or she may not appear depressed on the surface?
Absolutely, absolutely. Suicidal ideations, it often comes as a flash. It's often comes as a flash. And many young people, particularly, you see, we all read in the newspaper that there was a minor quarrel, there was a lover's tiff, or the mother did not allow the mobile phone to be used, and the child just kind of did something and ended his or her life. So in many people who finally commit suicide, the impulsivity, the sudden sense of sadness and anger, they do something and the life ends. So it may well be possible that this person did not have suicidal ideation for a prolonged period. So I think it is very important to understand that ultimately suicide, there are many, many, many reasons, and simplifying it to say that this person only had depression or only had impulsivity, I think is too simple. We know of so many stories, isn't it, that the school
Right.
the child has been rebuked in the school and kind of did something, jumped off from the
Yeah.
5th floor of the school. So
And I think in this last 1 year, I think the story that's been highlighted the most is for young people, their device being taken away, and that's led
absolutely,
to,
absolutely.
them ending their lives. And we know that as professionals that there's so much that's underlying in that trigger behavior, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
So there's
there's
someone
no
else.
one
Yeah.
simple cause
No
of
one.
suicide, isn't it? It's a very complex matrix of many, many reasons which can trigger suicide.
So there's another question that someone's asked: are all depressed people suicidal?
No, definitely. See, what is depression? Depression, I can be sad. I can be missing a lot of things. So that is depression. But that is not depression as a disease. So depression as a feeling is normal. Temporary sadness, feeling a bit low, feeling a bit blue, not wanting to go to work, feeling a bit dejected. That is part of all our lives. Most of us feel that at some point in our times. Right. When it increases in magnitude, when it impairs our functioning, our relationship, our studies, our sense of well-being, how we look into the future, then it becomes a disorder. And that is an illness.
Right.
But otherwise, I feel that life is like an Indian thali, where there's a bit of bitter, there's a bit of dessert, there's a bit of rajma, pulao. If you're a non-vegetarian, some mutton, everything is there. So sadness is a part of life. So that depression is a part of life. But depression as a disorder is a separate thing. Sure. And I think it's very important to understand that.
Right, right. And so someone else has asked that if there's a person who's under depression for 4-5 years and is on medication, would this condition be permanent, or can they actually come out? So I'm presuming
they can come out.
The medication isn't supporting or helping them as much.
Yeah, depression, people can come out of depression. There are, as I said, each depression, if you have seen one person with depressive illness, you have seen one person with depressive illness. It's everything is different. My life is different from your life, so therefore, the way I will express depression, the way I will tackle depression, how I will navigate my life course with depression is entirely separate from, say, someone else's. And what happens in life, how, what future brings for me, how hopeful I become, how I train myself, to get better, all have an impact. So it's not at all true that people with depression need kind of lifelong treatment or they can't come out of it. Loads of people.
So it's not a permanent illness.
It's not a permanent illness.
Right.
It's not a permanent illness. But having said that, even if it is, hypertension is also a permanent illness. It's diabetes is also a permanent illness. I can lead a very, very productive life even if I am depressed and on treatment. I will be functioning like any other person.
Right.
I think the stigma of taking medicines is also greatly exaggerated. Also, the other fact is, if I'm taking medicines for my knee pain, somehow I won't feel awkward about it. But if you give me medicines for my depression, I will assume that I'm weak and therefore Shubhika has given me medicine. So why should I need medicines to make myself feel better? The important point is, depression is actually a very complex multi-system disorder in which brain chemicals do not function as they should be. And therefore, taking help of medicines, that chemical imbalance is rectified. And as it is in diabetes, as it is in hypertension. So there is no, harm or shame in taking a medicine if we want to feel okay about what is happening to us. And it doesn't change us as a person. It doesn't make us weak.
Right. I think that's a wonderful way to put it, that, to look at depression medication just the way you would for diabetes or hypertension. Because I think there's so many myths around psychiatric medication, because people think that they'll be in some altered states or ye to pagal kar dega mujhe. So, and people also have this ideology that, I'll be sleeping all day or becoming fat. So could you maybe bust some of these myths around taking medication? Because so many people are so averse to the idea, because the thought of medication actually scares them more.
I think that's a very important question, Shubhika. Thank you for asking me. I think let me answer it in, kind of break it up. I think some of the myths are not myths, they are true. Nothing happens because of nothing. So if myths are created, then there must be some kind of truth behind it. Definitely some medicines do produce sedation. Definitely some medicines which we use in psychiatry, people do put on weight. So therefore, we have to be mindful of that, and we have to manage the medication properly so there are least side effects. And trust me, there are plenty of medicines now which do not have either of the side effects. So therefore, even if you were given one kind of medicine with which you had those side effects, and not everyone has those side effects, but if I do, then I can ask my doctor to change the medicines and be well with some other medicine. So that is doable. But there is a lot of truth in these myths that they kind of do produce a bit of sedation, but there are loads of others which don't. The stigma really comes from, I have thought a lot about why people are so wary of taking medicines for the mind. If I tell you that your right knee is not functioning properly and you need to kind of take a medicine for that, you will feel okay about it. Because Shubhika doesn't identify herself with her right knee. It's a part of you, but that's not you. If I tell you, Shubhika, you have to take a medicine for your depression because your mind is not functioning properly, you will feel bad about it because you think, Dr. Ram, do I really need a medicine for my mind? Because you identify with your mind. Shubhika is equal to her mind,
right?
What she is. So therefore, for us, if I tell you that I am giving you a medicine which will alter your mind and it will help you to get better, automatically loaded in this statement, in this conversation, is the fact that somehow you are a bit weak, therefore you need this medicine. It is an integral part, that is why people very justifiably feel that taking medicines for the mind is something which we should avoid. The hard fact is there is nothing called the mind. Everything is the brain. Mind is your personalized brain.
Right.
So my brain, Shubhika's brain, Mrs. Singh's brain, they are all absolutely identical, but our minds are our personalized experiences imprinted on the brain, and therefore I am a different human being, and all of us, the billions of people are different individuals. So the brains are the same, okay, but the mind is something different because minds are personalized brains, and there is no shame in taking medicine so that our brain works properly. Like there is no shame taking medicines for your prostate so that you can pee properly. It is
Right.
as simple.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think look at it as brain health versus the identification of my mind.
True.
Right.
See, because automatically people feel that if I'm taking some medicine for my mind, is there something wrong with me? Is
Right.
there, am I a bad person? Am I a weak person? Will my colleagues think, less of me?
Mm.
I think that is where the problem comes.
And I think that's also when people have outbursts, when they might be, going through something and they have outbursts. The typical reaction is, what is wrong with you? That's again a judgmental stereotype, but I think that's also so integrated in our language that it perhaps needs a lot of consistent change. Right. So there's another very interesting question that has been asked by a volunteer. And she says, thank you so much, Dr. Ram, for your talk today. But my question is, while listening to someone who is having suicidal thoughts, what is the most important factor we should focus on other than depression, and what else could trigger suicidal thoughts?
See that again, I didn't. So let me.
Okay, so I'll break it up. So one is, so while listening to someone who's having suicidal thoughts, what is the most important factor we should focus on? And this is from someone who's probably at a volunteer at Lifeline or at another
Right. Thank you for that. So I think a wonderful question, and I think each of us should be aware of it.
Yeah.
So what the process we follow. So imagine yourself having a conversation with someone who is suicidal. So the technique we all follow is something known as the funneling of questions. Now, the way I will ask my questions need to have a purpose. What is the purpose of my conversation with the person who is expressing suicidal ideas? I have got one single purpose: to prevent suicide.
Right.
Isn't it? So therefore, my questions has to gently probe around the area in a very sensitive and again a very respectful manner, so that I can figure out what is the probability of this person to kill himself or herself in the immediate future. So what are the things I would ask for? How are you feeling? I'm feeling very bad. How long have you been feeling like this? I've been feeling like this for so long. Do you at times feel that you would kind of, just get rid of all these feelings and run away somewhere? I said, yes, I do feel. Have you ever felt that life would be better off if you just dropped dead? So see, I'm gradually increasing the pitch of my questions and going towards the exact bullet point, which is the suicidal ideation. Right. So have you ever felt like that? So yes, I have felt like, life may not be worth living. So then I would ask, have you thought of suicide? I said, yes, I've thought about suicide. How long have you been thinking about it? For months. Have you made any plans? Yes, I have made plans. What are those plans? When do you want to carry it out? And then once I get to what we call scientifically the intentionality of the person, the intent, and how deep it is, we then start talking to the person. So I'm now convinced that this person is deeply suicidal, quite intent, So the landscape is now clear. So then I move on to my second quest, which is bringing that person back from that precipice back towards the mainland, so that the person doesn't commit suicide till I engage with him or her again tomorrow. So I think our entire conversation has to be centered, gently funneling the questions to get an idea regarding how deep are the suicidal intent, and we need to probe very gently. So I wouldn't write at the first moment, have you thought of suicide? Are you thinking of killing yourself? I will do it very gently. The other point is, do not be afraid to ask about suicidal intent, because it is not going to promote suicidal ideas. A lot of people are wary of asking this because they think that if I ask, then will the person commit suicide? Science has shown it is an absolute no. You can gently, sensitively, respectfully ask about suicidal ideation, plans, and how deep those plans are. So be gentle, be sensitive, and ask that question, and continue to engage so that the person we are able to, bring some light into the conversation.
Right. Thank you for highlighting that, Dr. Ram, because, I know in the training charter that's followed by Befrienders India, that asking the suicide question is very important to a risk 2 and 3 caller. And most times when people are getting trained, they really hesitate and say, but why should we ask? And if we ask, what if the person does it? So I think hearing from an institution like you is actually, I think, going to really reassure everyone listening today that asking the suicide question does not actually lead to suicide.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's, I'll take the last question, and the question is, can betrayal and social media trolling lead to suicide or suicidal ideation?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, it's one of the curse of, the modern society, really. And all of us who have been working in the field have had to listen to terrible stories of trolling, how it, I have seen a lot of young people who have tried to commit suicide because of morphed images and stuff like that. And I think I'm not sure how to deal with it. And this whole very toxic culture, particularly in men and boys, are so deeply insensitive and disrespectful. I'm not sure how, one can deal with it, but definitely it is an important part.
Right. I think especially in this last year, a lot of TikTokers have been reported and influencers have ended their life over trolling. And I think Sri Ranjani now wants to take over. But if I may just add one last question, because I think this is again a very important question that Dr. Ram could answer, is what are some protocols to be followed by counselors, mental health professionals, as well as community workers that are appropriate protocols and steps for seeing somebody who is dealing with suicide or is having severe suicidal ideation?
There are excellent protocols, and there's something which you remember last year, Shubhika, it was not last year, it was the year before last when we had this program in JU.
Right.
We released this document. So if any of you are, I can share, it's in English. So basically I will tell you what it is. It's an excellent how to do manual in Bengali and in English for all of us. Anyone in the community, be it a counselor or be it my next door neighbor, what are the protocols they need to follow if someone we come face to face with the suicidal? I think there are excellent guidelines, excellent, simple, doable guidelines which are available. And I would be quite happy to share with anyone who can, if they send an email, and I can share it with you, and then.
Sure. And I think we can send it out to everyone who's here today.
Yeah.
Right. So I thank you so much for this interaction. It was a pleasure as always. And I will have Sri Ranjani come back on screen to take over.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ram. That was very interesting and very in this. So we all learned a lot. We all learned a lot from your this, and how important listening is. It's there. Now we all in Befrienders, that's what we are trained for, to listen to callers who are depressed, distressed, and suicidal. And Befrienders India has been working for the past 26 years on these issues of suicide prevention. We provide emotional support to the people who are depressed, distressed, and suicidal. Over phone, over telephone, over emails, over face-to-face, just to name a few. And we have our president, Advocate Rajesh Pillai, here. I would just request Rajesh to just brief all of us about Befrienders India.
Thank you, Sriranjani. Dear volunteers of Befrienders India, office bearers of different Rotary clubs and other dignitaries gathered here. We have a wonderful session by Dr. Ram. He has explained how important it is to build a rapport with the caller, in our language, caller, and then the importance of asking about suicide, which we still have. Many of the volunteers have doubts whether we are trying to instill an idea of suicide. But he clearly said that we should ask about suicide to gauge the death wish. Creating hope through action is the theme for this year's Suicide Prevention Day, selected by International Association of Suicide Prevention. Befrienders India is the national body of all suicide prevention organizations working in this field. There are about 15 centers all over India, and there are a lot more are joining now in the Befrienders bandwagon. Befriending is nothing but it's an active listening. It's not judgmental, non-critical, non-advising. Befrienders India had already created hope through its action. During this pandemic also, we have not stopped working. None of the centers have closed down. We are still, we have not even reduced the timing also. Against all odds, all the volunteers have shown great spirit. You must understand that almost the average age of all our volunteers is about 50, but still we are going great with providing good service to the society. Today, Befrienders India is very excited to be associated with the Rotary movement, which is one of the leading service organizations of the world. Together, we can achieve more. I wholeheartedly thank Rotary movement in their decision to join hand with Befrienders India for this noble cause. Let's work together and create hope through action. In a big country like India, our numbers are very limited. Maybe we are only about 500 Befrienders all over India. We need more support from service organizations like Rotary. Definitely professionals like Dr. Ram and all others will definitely be very helpful to promote the cause. So let's work together and create hope through action. I'm really glad that Rotary has joined, took up this decision to observe Suicide Prevention Day with Befrienders India. Thank you so much for the Rotarians, Rotaract, every other office bearers of Rotary, and a very I'm really excited that Calcutta, Lifeline Calcutta has taken a leading role in this program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajesh, for briefing all of us about Befrienders India. The centers who have been a partner to today's program, Roshni from Secunderabad. I would like to share the numbers of the centers who have joined in today so that people here can note it down. And in case, someone, your family, friend, or anyone required some kind of support, some kind of listening to, you can always call us up. Roshni from Hyderabad, and our phone numbers are 040 6620 2000 or 040 6620 2001. We have Maitri Kochi here, and their phone numbers are 0484 2540 530. And of course, we have Lifeline here, and Lifeline's numbers are 033 404 47437 or 9088 30303. Also, all these centers are working 7 days a week. So can we have Molly, the Deputy Director of Lifeline Foundation, to give us the vote of thanks and the concluding remark?
Thank you, Sri Ranjani. 10th September every year is very special for all the volunteers who work with various centers of Befrienders India. It is special because this is the day that we celebrate the work that we do. The work that we do silently all year round. Most of the time, we quietly make a difference only to those distressed callers who may reach out to us. I would like to thank Rotary Club of Calcutta for supporting Lifeline Foundation with the Go Yellow India campaign. You have always encouraged us. Rotary Club of Madras, Rotary Club of Cantonment Secunderabad, Rotaract Club of Kolkata, Rotaract Club of George College and George School of Law. Thank you for joining in today and for your support for this much needed cause. May the movement grow. Our sister centers of Roshni Secunderabad, Maitri Kochi, your collaboration and joining hands lends so much more meaning and depth to the movement. Thank you. 91.9 Friends FM has been supporting us over the last decade or so to spread the word about our work. We are grateful for their support. Unless more people know about the free telehelplines, our work will not yield results. Dr. Ram, you have been a pillar of support to Lifeline over the last decade and a half. For us at Lifeline, it's always let's ask Dr. Ram for everything. Thank you for being here today and sharing all your thoughts and insights with us. It was indeed an enriching experience to listen to you. The clarification about medication was just what we needed. Every single day we get calls from people who are mentally ill but completely reluctant to take medication. The only thing they all say is, I don't want to be dependent on medicines. I think my mind is strong enough. I don't need the medication. This is a standard thing we listen almost every day. Thank you, Dr. Ram. I cannot but acknowledge the volunteers of the various befriending centers who are here with us, even though a lot of them could not get in. But thank you for being there for the distressed callers, for your dedication, hard work towards the cause of suicide prevention. Last but not the least, thank you viewers for being here today and for all the questions that you asked. Hope you will support the cause in your own way, wherever you are. Thank you everyone once again. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. I will share the numbers again through the chat box. And please, our efforts is to emotionally support and empower each and every caller. Please reach out because life always deserves a second chance. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. I'll attach all the numbers in the chat box before we end. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.